Summer 1943, Camp Crossville, Tennessee. The sight of a brown drink foaming inside a bottle held a German soldier's attention. He had never encountered anything like it. After 2 years of war in North Africa, surviving on hard biscuits and ersatz coffee, the sweetness and fizz of Coca-Cola felt like something that shouldn't exist. It sold for 5 cents at the camp canteen. The guards said that was the same coin American children used from their allowances. That summer, across U.S. prison camps, 371,683 German POWs faced a daily reality that clashed with everything Nazi propaganda had told them about American fragility. They saw a country where ice cream was an ordinary dessert, soft drinks were routine, and candy bars were so plentiful that guards sometimes handed them out. These simple treats, things many German children had never even tried, began to strip Nazi ideology of its credibility more effectively than any organized information campaign. Abundance could be counted in sugar and carbonation, in chocolate and ice cream, exposing an industrial strength so immense that German deprivation no longer looked like heroic sacrifice, but like avoidable misery. What started as disbelief at American sweets would, over time, turn into a far deeper psychological shift. The end of the Desert War. The Axis surrender in Tunisia in May 1943 brought roughly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers into Allied captivity. These seasoned desert veterans, men who had fought under Rommel and driven the British back toward Egypt, expected prisoner life to be brutal. Nazi messaging had primed them for American cruelty and hunger. Instead, almost immediately after surrender, they were issued American field rations. The same packages U.S. soldiers often complained about contained what felt to the prisoners like luxuries: crackers, processed cheese, candy, fruit bars, instant coffee, sugar tablets, and cigarettes. Men who had endured months of minimal food treated these rations as banquets. Military records from North African processing camps note breakfasts of pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, and milk, foods that had disappeared from German military supply long before. From the very beginning, the Allies were feeding captured enemies better than those enemies had been fed at home, though the full psychological meaning of that would become clear only later. One German officer later told the International Red Cross, "We expected to be starved as prisoners. Instead, the Americans fed us better than our own army had. This confusion about American resources began our education." The Atlantic crossing became a lesson in abundance. In the summer of 1943, Liberty ships carried POWs across the ocean, and in the process delivered an intense demonstration of American capacity. These mass-produced vessels, completed at peak output at the pace of one every 42 hours, moved as many as 30,000 prisoners to the United States each month. Naval documentation shows the prisoners' food aboard matched or even surpassed what crews received. About 3,500 calories a day, with fresh bread, meat, vegetables, and coffee served with sugar and milk. Refrigeration systems, standard on American ships, kept food fresh through the 2-week voyage. Most striking of all, multiple accounts confirm that ice cream was served during crossings. The log of the USS General M.B. Stewart for July 1943 notes ice cream given to prisoners on July 4, made with the ship's ice cream machine producing 10 gallons per batch. For men who hadn't seen ice cream since before the war, eating it in the middle of the Atlantic was almost impossible to process. Arrival in the United States overturned the story they had been told. When the ships reached ports such as Norfolk and Newport News, German POWs stepped into a country Nazi propaganda insisted could not exist. Norfolk Naval Base. Spread across 4,300 acres, with major waterfront operations, was moving more cargo in a single day than large German ports handled in a week. At the port exchanges, the shops serving dock workers, prisoners saw shelves packed with familiar American brands: Hershey, Mars, Nestlé. Procurement records from 1943 show these exchanges carried dozens of candy varieties, priced like anywhere else in the country. 5 cents for most bars, the same price charged nationwide. Even the train ride inland reinforced the same message. Instead of the cattle cars common in Europe, German POWs travelled in passenger coaches, and dining cars served full meals. Menus preserved from July 1943 list fried chicken, vegetables, pie, and coffee. The prisoners learned that this wasn't a staged display for them. It was simply how American rail travel worked. Inside the camp system, comfort and commerce made the deepest impression. Across the United States, the prison camp network housed POWs in conditions that went beyond Geneva Convention requirements. Camp Crossville, Tennessee. Typical of many large facilities, had electric lighting, hot water, flush toilets, and heated barracks. Yet it was the camp exchanges, the PX stores, that left the strongest mark. According to U.S. Army quartermaster records, camp exchanges carried a wide range of goods. Several soft drink brands, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, along with candy bars and other sweets, ice cream where refrigeration allowed, cigarettes and tobacco, fresh fruit, snacks, and even beer at 3.2% alcohol. POWs earned about 80 cents a day for labor, later increased to $1. With Coca-Cola priced at 5 cents and candy bars often the same, a single day's pay could buy 16 items, a level of everyday plenty that was hard to imagine for men from Germany, where such products, if they existed at all, typically depended on connections and rare access. Coca-Cola, in particular, came to represent what prisoners saw as American industrial democracy. Wartime output reached extraordinary scale. Company records indicate that 5 billion bottles were produced in 1943 alone. A military agreement ensured 5-cent Coca-Cola for American servicemen worldwide, an obligation that demanded enormous logistical reach. Most German prisoners had barely known the drink before capture, yet in the United States they found it everywhere. Each camp received steady deliveries, and work details noticed vending machines and coolers across daily life, at gas stations, factories, and schools. People of every age and social background drank it casually, sometimes leaving bottles half-finished without a second thought. For technically minded prisoners, the consistency itself was astonishing. Coca-Cola tasted the same, whether it was opened in Maine or Texas. Quality control on a level they had not seen matched by German industry. The system behind it challenged Nazi assumptions about American disorder. Syrup concentrate produced in Atlanta, shipped nationwide, and transformed into identical bottles at local plants, showed a degree of coordination that contradicted the propaganda image of chaos. Coca-Cola archives also document the scale of distribution to camps. Many received weekly deliveries of roughly 200 to 300 cases, with 24 bottles per case. At Camp Hearn, Texas, records indicate consumption of about 7,000 bottles a week during the summer of 1943. Ice cream inside American prison camps felt equally unreal to men who hadn't seen it since before the war. Yet Army documentation confirms that in camps with sufficient refrigeration, ice cream was served regularly during the summer months. The military treated it as a morale essential, important enough that specialized ice cream ships were constructed for the Pacific Fleet. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, the July 4, 1943 celebration included ice cream made on site. Prisoners watched hand-cranked freezers produce gallons using ice and salt, along with cream, sugar, and flavorings. The easy use of resources that were scarce in their world, ice in July, cream and sugar turned into a leisure food, revealed priorities they struggled to comprehend. By 1944, many camps had electric ice cream machines. The range of flavors, chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, butter pecan, surpassed what German ice cream shops had offered even before the war. Prisoners could buy ice cream bars for 10 cents, ice cream sandwiches for the same, or cups in different flavors. Procurement records show that larger camps ordered roughly 50 to 100 gallons of ice cream per week during summer, with frequency varying by region and season. For prisoners, it meant repeated access to a frozen luxury that had disappeared entirely from German life. Sugar left one of the strongest impressions of all. In Germany, sugar was tightly rationed. Civilians received about 280 grams per month when supplies were available. In American camps, sugar could sit in bowls on mess hall tables for unrestricted use. Quartermaster records from 1943 to 1945 show shipments of 100-pound bags of refined sugar arriving weekly. Camp bakeries used it freely. Cakes, cookies, and pies appeared often, and coffee, tea, cereals, and desserts were sweetened without limitation. A documented episode at Camp Aliceville, Alabama, highlights the difference. In August 1943, humid weather hardened several hundred pounds of sugar, making it difficult to use. Instead of steaming and salvaging it, kitchen staff discarded it and ordered new supplies. German prisoners working in the kitchen were reportedly disturbed by the waste. Chocolate underscored the same pattern of everyday plenty. Hershey, Mars, and Nestlé produced millions of bars each month, even under wartime conditions. The military alone bought about 380 million pounds of chocolate products during the war years. Camp exchanges carried multiple chocolate options: standard Hershey bars, ration and emergency chocolate, and assorted candy bars with chocolate, generally priced from 5 to 10 cents. Prisoners discovered that Americans even had brand preferences, choosing casually between varieties, something that implied not scarcity, but choice. Monthly Red Cross parcels reinforced that contrast. American Red Cross records describe standard packages that included chocolate or candy bars, along with items such as instant coffee, processed cheese, crackers, canned meat, cigarettes, soap, and more. These parcels supplemented regular rations, delivering extras that, in many cases, exceeded what German civilians received as their basic allotments. Thanksgiving, in 1943, gave German prisoners a first direct encounter with the scale of American holiday plenty. A tradition unique to the United States, it revealed a coordinated national capacity for consumption that far surpassed anything they had known. U.S. Army records indicate that prison camps across the country served the standard Thanksgiving meal: roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes and gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, pumpkin pie, along with coffee and milk. supplying this dinner not only to roughly 425,000 POWs, but also to millions of American servicemen around the world, highlighted a logistical and organizational reach that was impossible to ignore. Just as striking was the message in the meal itself. German prisoners were fed the same dinner as American soldiers, an equality of treatment that cut directly against Nazi racial hierarchy. Christmas 1943 brought another shock, this time from ordinary civilians. Church groups, civic organizations, and private individuals sent gifts to German POWs. The American Friends Service Committee alone distributed 50,000 Christmas packages to enemy prisoners. Typically, these parcels contained homemade cookies, candy, toiletries, games and books, cigarettes, and writing supplies. Communities near the camps often added their own contributions. In Tonkawa, Oklahoma, townspeople delivered homemade treats to prisoners at Camp Tonkawa. In Hearne, Texas, church groups brought Christmas cookies and candy to Camp Hearne. This willingness to show generosity toward enemies posed a fundamental challenge to Nazi ideology. Americans with relatives fighting Germany still extended charity to German prisoners, demonstrating a form of strength expressed through mercy rather than revenge. As the labor shortage grew, German POWs were increasingly sent beyond the wire, and they began to see American food production up close. By 1944, about 100,000 prisoners were working in agriculture and food processing, learning firsthand how the abundance they had tasted was being created. In Michigan orchards, prisoners harvested cherries destined for maraschino production, the bright toppings for ice cream sundaes. What stunned them was the volume. Individual orchards producing tons of fruit for what amounted to decoration. In canneries, they watched quality control practices that discarded perfectly edible food over small floors. Del Monte records from 1944 show roughly 15% of fruit being rejected for canning due to irregular size or minor blemishes, usually redirected to animal feed. Sugar beet operations in Colorado and Nebraska exposed a level of mechanized agriculture beyond anything prisoners associated with Germany. On a scale they found hard to reconcile, single farms produced more sugar beets than entire German regions. They also learned why sugar seemed so casually available. American sugar output from cane and beets together reached about 7 million tons a year, a figure that matched what they were seeing in camp life. Prisoners assigned near schools observed early forms of organized school lunch programs. Children were served hot meals that included milk, protein, and vegetables. The National School Lunch Act would only formalize the system in 1946, but wartime programs were already operating. The milk supply made a particular impression. Many schools provided fresh milk daily. The logistics of delivering milk day after day to thousands of schools signaled an organizational competence the prisoners believed Germany struggled to achieve even for military needs. In some cafeterias, children could also buy ice cream. For Germans watching, the idea of school children purchasing frozen desserts while German children faced shortages carried a heavy psychological weight. When minimum security prisoners were taken to American diners under guard, they encountered abundance expressed in everyday democracy. These modest restaurants offered menus that, in Germany, would have resembled what only the elite could expect, yet here they were available to anyone with a little money. Price lists documented from 1944 show the pattern. A hamburger for 25 cents, Coca-Cola for 5, a slice of pie for 15, an ice cream sundae for 25, and a full dinner special for 65 to 75 cents. Just as powerful as the food was the equality built into the experience. Anyone could order anything. A factory worker and a bank president might sit side by side at the same counter, serve the same meal by the same waitress for the same price. An everyday contradiction of German assumptions about rigid social rank. As prisoners gained access to American newspapers and magazines, they discovered published production figures that made Germany's efforts look small by comparison. Reports from 1944 pointed to US output on a scale that dwarfed what prisoners knew. Sugar, around 7 million tons. Chocolate and cocoa products totaling £380 million purchased by the military alone. Coca-Cola at 5 billion bottles in 1943. Ice cream exceeding 500 million gallons. And milk production at 119 billion. Against those numbers, German production in the same period was defined by rationing and scarcity. Sugar tightly controlled and largely beet-based. Chocolate prioritized for military needs. Soft drinks produced in minimal quantities. Ice cream nearly absent, and milk heavily rationed. The fact that such statistics were printed openly in the American press added another layer. It signaled confidence and transparency, and it suggested that America's wartime production surpassed even Germany's best pre-war levels. By late 1944, the reversal became unmistakable. German POWs were no longer primarily recipients of aid. They were sending food to Germany. Using camp wages, they bought American goods to mail home. Chocolate bars, instant coffee, and canned products. International Red Cross records confirm this shift, marking a moment when captivity in the United States enabled prisoners to support families living under deprivation in Germany. German prisoners held in the United States sent an estimated 11 million parcels back to Germany during their captivity, and most of them contained food. The effect on families was destabilizing in a way Nazi ideology could not absorb. Relatives living under deprivation were receiving American abundance from sons and fathers who were technically imprisoned, while those at home struggled in freedom. That reversal, plenty arriving from captivity, hunger endured outside it, cut deeply into the credibility of the regime's promises and myths. American rationing during the war only highlighted the scale of the gap between the two societies. US citizens complained about sugar limits of £2 per person per month, still more than triple what Germans were allotted when sugar was available at all. Meat restrictions in the United States, about 28 ounces per person per week, were higher than what many Germans received in an entire month. Even under rationing, Americans maintained consumption levels that Germans regarded as unattainable luxury. Records from the Office of Price Administration indicate that Americans still purchased about 74 pounds of sugar per capita in 1944, despite rationing, roughly 10 times German consumption. Beyond Coca-Cola, prisoners encountered the full breadth of America's soft drink economy. Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, Orange Crush, and many regional brands competed across the country. The variety itself, several companies producing near identical consumer goods at scale, signaled a kind of abundance that could not exist inside a tightly controlled German system. Bottling plants operated in every major city, using standardized technology for carbonation, filling, capping, labeling, and distribution. Individual plants turned out millions of bottles each year, and the network extended into small towns, gas stations, and grocery stores. By the end of the war, American soft drink production reached into the billions of bottles annually, amounting to dozens of bottles per citizen each year. For prisoners, the output of this single industry seemed larger than entire categories of German consumer production. In the spring of 1945, the final psychological blow arrived through film and newsreel. German POWs in America watched images of US soldiers handing chocolate and chewing gum to German children as Allied forces moved through the collapsing Reich. The children's excitement at receiving candy their own government could not provide sealed the contrast in a way no argument could undo. American troops advancing through enemy territory carried enough sweets to give away. The state that promised victory delivered hunger. Other footage showing the liberation of concentration camps and soldiers sharing rations with emaciated survivors reinforced a brutal moral comparison. The army they had fought was feeding victims of the system they had served. Between 1945 and 1946, German POWs returned to a devastated homeland. Many had gained noticeable weight in American captivity, while their families at home had lost weight to starvation and deprivation. They arrived with direct knowledge of abundance, entering a landscape of scarcity. Medical examinations indicated that many German prisoners went home healthier than they had been at the time of capture, returning to relatives weakened by years of shortage. The contrast was physical and undeniable. Some men brought their last Red Cross parcels back with them: coffee, chocolate, canned goods that became precious household assets. Children who barely remembered what chocolate tasted like received Hershey bars from fathers who, in prison camps, had been served ice cream regularly. In an unexpected way, former POWs became voices that helped make American aid politically acceptable. They had witnessed a form of abundance that was not based on taking from others, prosperity generated through production rather than conquest. Their accounts that the United States could afford to rebuild former enemies shaped attitudes toward the Marshall Plan. These men had come to believe American power was rooted in productive capacity, not extraction. They had seen a society wealthy enough to discard food while fighting a global war, and that observation reshaped how they understood economics and national strength. That mental shift, creation instead of conquest, fed into the approach of post-war reconstruction. The West German economic miracle of the 1950s was influenced in part by knowledge absorbed in American prison camps. Former POWs who had observed US production methods, distribution systems, and consumer markets carried those lessons back into rebuilding efforts. They had learned that mass production could turn luxuries into everyday goods, that standardization could produce both efficiency and consistent quality, and that broad consumer availability could reinforce political stability. In their experience, industrial democracy could outproduce authoritarian control, and the proof had been delivered in Coca-Cola, sugar, and ice cream. The broader record of this transformation is preserved across multiple kinds of documentation: military quartermaster files, International Red Cross reports, corporate production records, especially Coca-Cola archives, along with POW correspondence that was censored but kept, plus post-war interviews, memoirs, and academic research, including the work of Arnold Kramer. Kramer, widely regarded as a leading historian of German POWs in America, argued that food abundance played a central role in their ideological change. His findings support the idea that routine American plenty accomplished something formal re-education programs could not. It shattered myths of Nazi superiority through lived experience. The statistical summary underscores the pattern. Across 1943 to 1946, average POW rations and access in U.S. custody typically amounted to roughly 3,300 to 3,600 calories per day, with sugar around 4 pounds per month when available, meat about 32 ounces per week, and milk up to roughly a quart per day when supplies permitted. Ice cream appearing regularly in summer and soft drinks sold freely for 5 cents offered prisoners a routine they could hardly reconcile with the world they had left behind. In Germany, during the same years, civilian rations told a different story. Daily calories fell to roughly 1,200 to 1,500. Sugar was limited to about 280 grams a month when it could be obtained at all. Meat was around 10.5 ounces per week and often unavailable. Milk was tightly restricted. Ice cream effectively disappeared, and soft drinks were not part of ordinary life. The contrast was not a matter of competing narratives, but of documented conditions. Enemy prisoners in the United States often ate better than German civilians, proving that American abundance extended even to defeated foes. That experience of American food culture did not end at the barbed wire. It echoed into post-war Germany. Coca-Cola returned to West Germany in 1949 and quickly became a visible emblem of the new alliance. Ice cream parlors that resembled American soda fountains appeared in German cities, while candy bars and chewing gum became small but potent symbols of recovery. Many former POWs, having learned the appeal of these products firsthand, later became importers of American foods. They understood the appeal went beyond flavor. To them, these goods signaled abundance, democracy, and modern life. The shift also affected how Germans thought about distribution, not just production. In the 1950s, the spread of supermarkets in Germany was often supported by former POWs, who had seen American grocery stores operate at scale. They had learned that democratic abundance depended on systems that could deliver variety cheaply and consistently, not merely on increasing output at the factory or on the farm. Across interviews and memoirs collected after the war, German POWs repeatedly described food abundance as a turning point. A former Africa Corps officer said in a 1975 interview, "We expected to defeat a weak, divided America. Instead, we found a nation that could give ice cream to enemies. That's when we knew we had lost more than a war. We had lost our entire worldview." Another veteran, interviewed for a documentary in 1985, remembered, "My first Coca-Cola was like drinking the future. It was sweet, fizzy, completely unnecessary, and available to anyone for a nickel. That drink contained everything Nazi Germany wasn't: abundant, democratic, joyful." Testimonies like these, gathered over decades, point to a claim the men themselves believed. American abundance achieved what military defeat alone did not: an internal, ideological break. Historians often describe the German POW experience in the United States as a rare kind of re-education that worked largely through observation rather than instruction. Prisoners watched a society operating at high productivity while treating enemies with dignity. Food mattered because it was universal. Hunger and satisfaction require no translation. Weight gain and improved health were visible. 3 consistent meals a day, combined with purchases from camp canteens, turned ordinary routines into constant, measurable lessons. For prisoners who knew German deprivation intimately, every meal became evidence of industrial capacity. Every 5-cent Coca-Cola demonstrated standardization and distribution. Every ice cream sundae suggested that abundance could exist without being reserved for an elite. The story carried forward into families. Children of former POWs grew up hearing accounts of impossible American plenty in prison camps. Stories that initially sounded exaggerated then appeared increasingly plausible as West Germany recovered and American products became common. In many cases, those children later studied or worked in the United States, drawn by the very world their fathers had described. They found the same realities. Supermarkets filled with variety, soda fountains serving sundaes, candy aisles offering dozens of choices. Over time, that influence extended beyond individuals. West German business culture absorbed lessons about consumer markets, quality standardization, and the political value of making everyday goods widely available. The economic miracle was not only a surge in production, it was the construction of abundance for ordinary citizens. Seen from the present, the transformation is unmistakable. Coca-Cola is ordinary, ice cream is routine, and American-style fast food is widespread in Germany. The historical lesson, as these accounts frame it, remains striking. Ideological change driven not by deprivation but by abundance, not by cruelty but by everyday dignity, not by propaganda but by what people could see, touch, and taste. For the former POWs, the most enduring memories were often sensory. The fizz of the first Coca-Cola, the first spoonful of ice cream, the first bite of a chocolate bar. Those sensations carried a force arguments rarely match. In their telling, they had not been persuaded by speeches, they had been convinced by lived reality. Men who had marched as soldiers of the Third Reich came home as witnesses to a different model of power. Not only the capacity to win battles, but the ability to produce so much that even enemies could be fed, and fed well.